Good. Good.
It's April, right? Okay, we recording? Okay, the April meeting of the Greenwich Township Land Use Board is called to order. Please rise for, I'm sorry, go ahead and read the public notice.
This is a regular meeting of the Land Use Board of the Township of Greenwich. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, in that a notice was published in the Star-Ledger and Express Times newspaper. Notice was posted on the municipal bulletin board in the Township Administration Building in Greenwich Township, New Jersey, and notice was filed with the Township Clerk.
Very good. Roll call?
Paul Bean, Class 1.
Here.
Joseph Totelo, Class 2.
Here.
Frank Marchetta, Class 3.
Here.
Ray Buckwalter, Class 4.
Here.
Bruce Williams, Class 4.
Here.
Kathy Coling, Class 4, excuse.
Yep, correct.
Don Marie Condas, Class 4. Mark Scuderi, Class 4.
Here.
Gary Hill, Class 4.
Here.
Joseph Fiamma, Alternate 1. Jeremy Blunt, Alternate 2.
Here.
Bill Cognac, Alternate 3.
Here.
Pam Paslis, excused, Alternate 4.
Excused, yes. Okay, all stand for the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes from March? And assume everyone read them over thoroughly 3 times, backwards and forwards. So, does anybody have any comments or corrections for the minutes? Then I'll ask for a motion to approve. Mark, thanks. Second?
Second.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
One.
Oh, we have, get the, Jeremy and Gary. You guys weren't here? Correct.
And,
Thank you.
yeah, three.
Oh, and Joe.
3.
So Gary Hill, Joseph Ham, and Jeremy Blunt.
Got it? Perfect, thank you. Okay, we have 3 ordinances to review tonight on the agenda. We'll start with ordinance 105-219 MF-1 for the Dumont Road Affordable Housing Site. Beth, are you going to summarize these for us?
I'd be happy to.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So,
For anyone that wants a full copy that didn't print them out, they're on the table in front of the dais if you want a copy of any of the 3 ordinances.
Okay.
You got the 105, 106, and 107.
Would you mind grabbing me? Thank you very much. Since you were there.
Let me see I want to see the final published version of this. Okay. So ready? All right, so the MF1 district ordinance is first ordinance 105-2019 is the regulating ordinance for the property generally known as the Dumont Road site. This was the site that has gone through a number of iterations. It was at 144, then down to, I think, 71. And now our new and final number is a total of 66 units, more specifically 66 affordable multifamily housing units. But one of the things that is really unique about this ordinance, in terms of it being a multifamily project, is that it doesn't just simply say, here's the number of units, or rather, here's the density, and the developer can configure the units in any way it likes. Instead, it puts a limitation to state that the maximum number of units per building is only 12. And so, for this property, which is, I think folks are familiar, but for this property, which is adjacent to single-family residential uses, that's important because it means that we're going to have smaller-scale buildings that will not be that will be more compatible with the single-family development that surrounds it, as well as, of course, with the commercial development that is adjacent to it to the south. The site is predominantly in a transition area between the single-family residential and the commercial. There are a variety of other standards in here, including standards relating to stormwater management facilities, landscape buffer requirements, and architectural design. Of course, this ordinance was put together to be consistent with the settlement agreement that the township has signed with Fair Share Housing Center that sets forth the township's obligation and then how it will be satisfied. That settlement agreement specifies 66 affordable units on this Dumont Road site. It is also, and importantly for tonight's discussion, specifically consistent with the housing element and fair share plan that this land use board recently adopted. That housing element, like the settlement agreement, identifies the township's obligation and how it will be satisfied. One of those mechanisms was indeed 66 units located on this property. So it's my recommendation to the land use board that you find that the ordinance is consistent with your adopted housing element and fair share plan, so consistent with your master plan.
Any discussion or comments from anybody? We had a chance to review this, I'm sure. We've been looking at it for quite a while, actually.
Yeah.
And the job tonight is to deem it consistent or inconsistent.
Correct.
Correct.
So,
It's actually
Not inconsistent.
not,
consistent, not inconsistent or inconsistent. All it has to be is not inconsistent under the law. That's what it
not
is.
inconsistent.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So it has to be not inconsistent.
Double negative, yep.
It can't be consistent,
It could be.
but mostly it's not inconsistent. Okay, got it.
Okay.
I think I follow you.
Clear as mud.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So, yeah, just opening up for comments. Does anybody on the board have any comments? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to find the,
I'll make the motion to find ordinance 105, 2019, not inconsistent with the master plan.
thank you for the not inconsistent. I'll second it. Roll call vote?
Paul Beam?
Yes.
Joseph Tutelo? Frank Marchetta?
Yes.
Ray Buckwalter?
Yes.
Bruce Williams?
Yes.
Don Marie Condos?
Yes.
Mark Scuderi?
Yes.
Gary Hill?
Yes.
Joseph Fiamma?
Yes.
Jeremy Blunt?
Yes.
Bill Cognac?
Okay. Next one.
Let's do the MF2 next. This is ordinance 106-2019. And this is the, I would say the companion ordinance in the sense that this is the other ordinance that is necessary for the township to fulfill its affordable housing obligation. So, just like the MF1 district, this ordinance stems from the township's settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center and as well as the town's adopted housing element and fair share plan. So this site is not for the Dumont Road property, it's for the
So-called Furman.
the Furman site. So block 40, lot 1.01 on Route 173 in Voorhees Road. This site, as stated in the settlement agreement and as stated in the housing element and fair share plan, I should say the ordinance, is specific that not less than 64 affordable units will be constructed on this site. And so this is also a multifamily project. This does not have the limitation to 12 units per building. It allows for a more typical multifamily project in respect to its location, which is adjacent to the state highway and also adjacent to a car dealership. Now, yeah, this also permits a total of 3 stories as opposed to the Dumont Road, which permits a total of 2 stories. But like the Dumont Road property, Dumont Road ordinance, this ordinance also includes the... Yeah, thank you, 2.5. This also includes architectural and landscape buffer requirements as well to help ensure that this is an aesthetically appealing project. So like I said, this ordinance is specifically consistent with your settlement agreement and also specifically consistent with your adopted housing element and fair share plan.
So if the Furman ordinance, 106-2019, the primary difference between this and the Dumont Road ordinance is the number of units?
It would say it's the number of units.
Well, I was going to say,
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
the
go on.
number of units, the number of floors,
yes.
and the fact that it's a single building. It's also a much smaller piece of property, so the density is a little bit higher by
Yes.
virtue of the fact that we don't have as much property there.
It's
to
about
work with.
14 acres for Dumont versus about 5.5 acres here.
Correct, okay. And that's really the crux of the difference between the two. Other than that, they all require the same amount of
not exact.
I mean, I'll say that the MF2 district, when I wrote it, I used the MF1 as a model, so a lot of the language and the format is the same, but there were a number of provisions that needed to be amended to account for the differences on this site, such as the height and the building type and landscaping, and also because I know that, I don't have the same concerns about stormwater management and where that location might be, so I don't have these provisions here like I do in Dumont, or the MF1.
So most of the differences are based on the density because it's a much smaller site.
Yeah, that necessitated a different building type and so forth, so different building height.
Okay. Does anybody else on the board have any questions about 106-2019?
I have one, the reference is that has the builder been consulted on it?
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
Was that a yes?
All right, that's just the extent that, since you asked the question, both of the developers agree with both of the ordinances as introduced by the Township Committee and as written in front of the Land Use Board tonight.
So our professionals have been working with the developers behind the scenes to make sure that, because our timeline is very constrained, we don't really have time for a lot of back and forth. We only have, a month and,
Well, I'm at the very end.
you can do the timeline later,
Yeah,
but
the
we
timeline
have
has-
a very compressed timeline, so they've had no choice but to work with the developers and make sure we're all on the same page, so to speak. Any other questions or comments from the board regarding? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to find this ordinance 106-2019 not inconsistent with the master plan. Thanks, Dawn. Second? Perfect. Roll
Okay.
call?
Oops, sorry.
Paul Bean?
Yes.
Joseph Chitella?
Yes.
Frank Marchetta?
Yes.
Ray Buckwalter?
Yes.
Bruce Williams?
Yes.
Don Marie Condos? Mark Scuderi? Harry Hill? Joseph Yama?
Yes.
Jeremy Blunt?
Yes.
Bill Kanya?
And the motion carries.
And then, last but not least, is one final ordinance, 107-2019. This ordinance is very much related to the other two, but it doesn't permit affordable housing in any way. It doesn't regulate affordable housing. What it does is it cleans up a conflict that was created in your ordinance via, that was created by the preparation of the MF1 and the MF2 districts.
Can I give them a quick background?
Sure.
This is a leftover. When the township went through comprehensive rezoning in 2006 and eliminated a number of zones and rezoned areas to other designations, a couple things were left in place. So there's a whole ordinance regulating garden apartments.
Yep.
Garden apartments are no longer allowed, and specifically, the Ingerman Dumont Road site wanted to make sure that they weren't deemed a garden apartment, and then, because they were not designing it as a garden apartment, and they didn't want to have anyone think it was going to be a garden apartment, so they asked that in the MF1 ordinance, that we say it's not a garden apartment, and then Beth said, why don't we just eliminate the garden apartment since they're not allowed anyway, and it's a much cleaner way of doing it.
Yeah, so we're getting rid of language that doesn't frankly apply to any existing use and doesn't apply to any zone district in the township. It's just needless language in your zoning
In
ordinance.
fact, in the master plan, there's no reference
Correct.
to garden apartments anywhere in any of the elements anymore.
Yeah, and for that reason, I recommend that the Land Use Board find that the elimination of this garden apartment language be consistent with your master
This is
plan.
totally consistent with the master plan. It's one of those rare instances.
You mean? Not going there.
I dare you.
Read my mind. Okay. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. We don't have any zone that allows garden apartments, so why
Right.
should we have a
Exactly.
zoning standards for garden apartments?
Right.
Yeah, that actually makes so much sense that I think we should not have too much discussion, but I'll open it up anyway. Questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve 107-2019 as
Not,
not inconsistent.
All right.
There you go.
Whatever.
I think Mark Scuderi gave us a motion, and Frank, thank you. Roll call, please.
Paul Bean?
Yes.
Joseph Tutela.
Yes.
Frank Marchetta.
Yes.
Ray Buckwalter.
Yes.
Bruce Williams.
Yes.
Don Marie Condis.
Yes.
Mark Scuderi.
Yes.
Gary Hill.
Yes.
Joseph Fiamma.
Yes.
Jeremy Blunt.
Yes.
Bill Kanye.
You can have that back. Okay. That's about as procedural as a land use board meeting can be, I think. Do we have any, you guys have been working with both of these developers. Do we have any idea what these projects are going to look like at this
So-
point?
Very timely question, because between 3:30 this afternoon to 4 o'clock, we've been asking for conceptual site plans and elevations, and we've been having a back and forth with the developers. The same period, we were having a back and forth on the ordinance, and we finally got, I'm not going to say final, but as close to final in a short period of time as possible. So I have exhibits that I actually want to show and have Beth describe, and I want to get the land use board here, if anyone has any comments on them, because Beth and I are going to take notes to bring back to the township committee, but I just want to be clear. This is the concept that Beth and I came up with this week.
So my idea of having a meeting adjourned at 7:47, which would be a record, is just
Not
completely
gonna
out the
happen.
window.
Out the window.
Next
We have
meeting.
agenda creep. But I think that's important. If you have that stuff,
Yeah.
let's look at
And
it.
just so you know, the reason, so these concept plans and elevations, in best of my opinion, they comply with the ordinances that you just reviewed, but we want to somehow tie in both developers to submit applications that are substantially consistent with a conceptual site plan and an elevation, so maybe something else could comply with the ordinance that people wouldn't like.
No bait and switch.
Right, we don't want to bait and switch, and so we're hoping to get something that the township committee will then authorize an amendment to both of the affordable housing agreements to add a paragraph to each, which says something to the effect that the application that they end up submitting to the land use board is going to be substantially consistent with Exhibit A, which will be a conceptual site plan, and Exhibit B, which will be an elevation.
So what did you get? Do you have
Yeah.
pictures?
Oh, yeah.
8 by 10 color glossies or what?
Even better, in some cases. yeah.
Wow.
So, you want to, why don't we start off with
No, Furman.
Furman,
Yeah, two Furman.
okay?
Do you want to hold, or do you want me to hold, or?
There's a gentleman in the back of the room wearing a maroon shirt who thought that I was joking when I told him he was going to be the exhibit holder. Excuse me, that's my son, by the way. No, we're not using the tripod, we're using it. But we'll use the tripod for the conceptual site plan, and then we'll use our human holder for the elevation. Yeah, I told you. It'll work for your coffee. Okay, so I want Beth to describe to the board the conceptual site plan, and then we have two sets of elevations for this project. One that has architecture that Beth and I, let's say, are more in favor of than the other one, although they're close, and we have color. Can you guys see that?
But I don't know anything.
Why don't we,
Nothing ever really came to you.
No, nothing. I heard it from,
Okay, so the guys up there, why don't
like,
you...
put a room in
well, I was going to say, why don't you just let them look at it for a minute or two, because you can kind of...
Well, Beth is going to point things out. Why don't you guys just go right in the front row?
John, you missed the opportunity.
He's going to go to He's going to be doing with these. Dan Anna. You check through that, and when we ask for the elevations, go on.
Ready? Ready. Okay, all right. So, I'm actually going to turn this, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but when I think of this site, I orient it to Route 173. So, this is New Jersey Route 173. This is Ford Heath Road, right here. For those that might be trying to figure out where this is the car dealership on 173. If you keep going, west on 173, you'll come into the 22 corridor in a little ways. But, so here's 173 in Voorhees Road, so that means obviously the site is a corner property. And what you see is, for this Furman property, they're proposing one building, that's what's shown in gray here, and the building is an L shape, so as to provide building frontage along the street as opposed to providing a large parking area along the street. Instead, the parking area is going to be shielded from the public way by the building, almost exclusively with the exception of this area along Voorhees Road. One of the other things that is important about the site design, well, there's several things that I'm going to go through, but the next thing that's important about the site design is not only have they provided the living area for the residents, but there's also a proposed playground and outdoor amenity right here. This area has not been designed, but the idea is that this area is sort of behind the building and not along the road frontage, because this is a significant step back. I'm going to say of roughly 150 feet, maybe 125 feet. This area will be shielded from the road, will be landscaped, screened, and so forth, but it'll provide an outdoor amenity area for the residents of this particular property. Additionally, the applicant is providing adequate parking to the site. There are adequate
Adequate parking meaning it complies with the residential
Yes.
site improvement standards, which are the statewide standards that apply to all residential development.
Yes. So they meet the parking requirements. They also meet the handicap or the ADA parking requirements. They also are providing a place for trash and recyclables, just like you'd expect in any multifamily development. And then down here, they have the proposed detention basin. And so one of the things I like about this property is it places the detention basin at the rear of the site, and it's not going to be sort of front and center to the main frontage, which is along Route 173. The other thing that is really important about this property, and you can see in color, is this large green swath along the side and rear property lines. So what we see is a significant landscape buffer area, and then this darker area, for those that can sort of make this out, this is an existing 26-foot wide drainage easement that currently exists on the property, and then it's going to be required to remain. There's limited plantings that can be done in this area, and for that reason, we have a wider landscape buffer shown on the site to ensure that even though this area will be green, we want to make sure that there are trees planted along the entire side and the property
The
line.
specifics, the green area is 40 feet wide. I believe the drainage easement is 25 feet wide, which would mean the landscape buffer is 15 feet wide.
Yep, so it's 15 feet right here, yep, and then, but it's an entire area of 40 feet, of which 15 feet will have the planted buffer. Any questions?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
So the area that's not encumbered by the drainage easement towards the top of the sheet, if you will, the plantings will still be in that 15, the inner 15 feet? Because you have 40 feet up at the top.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, like that
Yes.
top section.
That's up to the land use board, where the land use board wants that 15 feet.
Yeah.
The concept plan says 15 of the 40 feet gets landscaping. That's a call by the land use board. The land use board wants it near the perimeter,
Okay.
it goes to the perimeter. If the land use board wants it towards the interior of that green area, it will go there.
What about along 173?
There are additional planting requirements that are necessary, that are set forth in the township's landscape ordinance, but this concept plan, that they'll have to comply with, this concept plan just doesn't get into that level of detail. We just wanted to ensure that the buffer along the side and the rear is shown, but I would expect that we're going to see planting, street trees and the like.
So basically, the buffer is shielded from adjoining property.
Yeah.
That's right.
Correct. But as you can see, we're not trying to create a site design that needs to be entirely shielded from the public rights of way. Instead, we're seeking to create a site design and an architectural design that is pleasant and appealing, and one that doesn't need to be entirely screened by trees.
Is the entrance there on 14th?
Yes, thank you. The only site access is along Voorhees Road.
One just suggestion from 17 years in law enforcement. All the parking, to me, looks really hidden from the road. And to me, that creates a little bit of a security concern because you can't see anything going on in that corner there. Like the building, to me, looks like it just shields the whole parking lot.
And that's something that I would maybe consult with Chief Hummer on, to see if maybe we flip it, just for safety and security.
Well,
So a couple comments on that. So one, I mean, that's certainly true that yes, the building purposely shields the parking. One of the things that I think will be a mitigating factor is, I mean, the property owner will surely have security provisions on the property, but more importantly, there are going to be sort of eyes on the street here, which is more of a planning term, but it basically means this is a multi-story building with, I'm going to say roughly half of the building is overlooking the parking lot. So you have a natural security in the sense of residents having visual access to the parking lot so that they see the funny business
So it's
going
been
down the
considered.
parking lot. They can
It's been
talk.
considered.
oh, it's been considered,
Yes.
and the decision was actually made, weighing the two, that it's better for the overall development of the township to have the building screen the parking rather than have parking in front of the building when we drive down the street. I mean, in other words, if the township has a choice of changing the aesthetics of this particular area, you'd rather have the car dealership change and not design this site to look like the car dealership, but to design this site so maybe the car dealership eventually will change.
Yep. No, as long as it's considered, that was the
Yeah.
only thing I would...
Yeah, that is one of the things we've talked about them is security.
I'm sure there's going to be some sort of camera safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry?
Will it need any development, or will it?
You mean, will it need any site work?
Well, improvements, or...
Improvement. You want to know
Or a traffic light?
No, it's not going to want it.
Well, I don't know about that. It's going to need to be evaluated on site.
A traffic light's going to have to be...
No,
down
no, I'm sorry. Oh, no.
That was the one-off
I
comment.
thought we were talking about the improvements to Voorhees Road, like some frontage improvements and so forth. No. There will not be a signal. Absolutely not.
And that actually brings up a good point, because even though we talked about the ordinance tonight, we're talking about the concept plan, these applications still need to come before the land use board, and so all of you will still have the ability to ask the same questions about traffic impacts, environmental impacts, tree locations, all of the typical topics that come up. This ordinance review does not end your ability to ask those questions. What's that? Yeah.
Picture of the building?
Yes.
Let's see if that... No.
That's just the elevation.
Dan, bring over, these are so we have two sets of elevations. The elevations that Ben is now showing are the elevations of what they propose the building to look like. Don't be locked into the color. We have another elevation where the color is different, but maybe these buildings might look a little better than the ones I'm holding. All right, so why don't we go like this, like it, make it easier.
Yeah.
And this one, hold up like this, like that.
Thank you very much. Of course. So, what we have is an earlier version and then a later version of the renderings. And so, the similarities are we have a variety of roof lines with gables throughout the...
Hey, come on, that's
So we have a variety of gables to break up the roof line. We also have recessed balconies, and that's what these are right here. So folks will have balconies, and you can see that in the yellow buildings as well. And then we also have a varying base course of the building, so we've got a difference between the siding and then brick in the yellow versus the stone in the newer buildings. That was a really great start that the applicant did, but they got some feedback, and this is what they've come up with. And the differences here are, some of them are more obvious. They maintain the roof line, they change the brick to the stone, they change the colors, but some of the other things that I think are in part more visible in the renderings because of the colors, but also some of the changes they've made, is they've added some of this additional architectural detail, and you can see the white framing around the balconies. You can more see the white framing along the buildings, and that really helps to break up the facade of the buildings. Now, they're still potentially open for some comments, and I think that the colors that they chose here, I'm not sure if
By the way,
colors...
they indicated whatever colors the township wants they'll get it.
Yeah.
So color is not the issue, it's really more of the which design,
Yeah.
the architecture, what do you like better?
So the cladding is like one platform.
It's hardy plank, they told us. Hardy plank is a synthetic, plastic platform.
So this is I would say, a similar building design you can see for a lot of the more modern architectural, multifamily building designs that you see around the state. You
In
can
fact,
see it, for example, in Lopatcon, at Sycamore Landing.
Sycamore Landings in Wapatcon is more what that one on the right hand looks like. And the left one is, looks more
Like Washington Heights.
Washington Heights.
Washington
I don't
Heights.
know that development, but the Sycamore.
Except Washington Heights doesn't have balconies.
You'll have a chance to see like the one on the right.
John, you mentioned Sycamore Landing. Does everybody know what Sycamore Landing is? It's the relatively new.
Next to the mall.
Right on 22, that's the right.
Yeah, right in Lopatcon. So this is these two are the renderings that are currently being considered, but we wanted to show the yellow one so that you could see the progress and the iterations.
The top one is Sycamore, the bottom one is
Washington Heights.
Washington Heights. Sycamore,
Is it Warren Heights or Washington Heights?
The one in Lopatcon?
Washington Heights.
No, one.
Oh, Warren Heights? Warren Heights.
Okay.
Sycamore, Warren Heights. Sycamore is on the top, Warren Heights is on the bottom.
So it's like a main entrance and then there's interior corridors, or they have different?
Yeah, there's going to be a main entrance, and then there'll be, so it'll be a double-loaded corridor, so there'll be a hallway with units on either side, and then, so the units will have interior access to the corridor, and then they'll also have, not access, but exterior space with the balcony.
Like it's interior corridors?
Yeah.
They have front doors.
Yeah, I don't know
What
that
is the
they,
entrance on that, please?
so, what I was going to say is, I don't think they specifically identified the entrance, but I can just tell you from experience, it's going to be somewhere in this area.
Well-
It's going to be,
He did mention,
okay.
he was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, John, one on the side,
Yeah.
and then one, I think, in the back, right?
Here and here?
They're not going to have an entrance along either of the streets because people are parking.
Yeah, everybody's going to come to it from here.
Correct, so they have an entrance on, they have at least, emergency exits on the end, but they were talking about having a main entrance to the building on the long side of the back of the L adjacent to the parking.
And you can start to see, it's hard to see on this building because the rendering is, we're in an early stage, but you can see a canopied entrance here. I'm not sure this is quite right, but you can start to see what they're thinking, that there's going to be a canopied main entrance that will direct residents and visitors to the site.
And obviously elevators.
ADA compliant.
Yeah.
Warren Heights.
Yeah, they may just put things there to make them look like.
Well, yeah, that may be.
If that's 173, I don't think there's an entrance.
I can tell.
No, that's
No, I'm just using.
Oh, is that
I
Voorhees?
think so. Isn't that Voorhees Road we're looking at? Right there, that?
Yeah, this is Voorhees
Yeah.
Road because it's the longer facade.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they're going to have an access here. I only use this as an example because you can start to see what they're thinking for the entrance, which is going to be a canopied
Yeah.
building entrance. So what else?
So you say no elevators?
I'm saying I'm not entirely sure.
I don't think there's going to be elevators. The buildings are going to be sprinkled.
I think that this
Including
story
the attic.
does not require elevators.
Right, does not require
And they're
elevators.
not going to include it unless the code requires it.
Correct.
It's a
Because again,
significant cost.
the concept is both of these developers are trying to get tax credits. And to get the tax credits, they have to be competitive. So on the one hand, they want to have something attractive so that you have two different developments, and one is more attractive than the other, but the rent is the same. As an owner, like they're going to develop and own and be the landlord, they want to have something that's going to make sure that they get all rented out so they can make their money. On the other hand, to be able to get the tax credits, they have to keep the cost as low as possible to be competitive with other people who are also applying for those tax credits.
So your ADA is
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ready for the month or?
No, how about comments? Which do people like better? Let's go around the land use board. You like the one on the right or the one on the left? So we can, because we want to give the governing body feedback.
Raise your hand if you like the one on the right. Oh, we got public now. Ready. I'm gonna say this is the clear winner.
Come on, let's go.
All right.
I got this one, no problem.
Let's go. That's not it.
What's
the car store park?
Wrong one.
I mean, I'd be happy to talk about it. I'm sure we've all heard enough about it.
Wrong one. How about this one?
Yes, okay. Dumont Road. Just to get everybody oriented, this is Dumont Road, and this is Greenwich Street. So what we've got are single-family homes up here, and then we've got the beginning of the Route 22 corridor down, not the Route 22, but the business uses associated along the Route 22 corridor down here to the south. And so this is our MF1 district, and what you see in this plan is a clustered portion of the site for development with the 66 affordable housing units, and then the remainder of the property being restricted as open space. So this land here is going to be set forth as part of a conservation easement. So even though you don't see development on it, it's going to be required to remain that way in the future. So this is not, it's not going to be public open space, but it'll be restricted from further development. And part of the reason why you see the development shifted in this direction towards Greenwich Street is because of the geology of the site. One of the things that's come to light is there are a lot of rock in this area that makes construction on the site. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to pass this around. You can see there's a map I'll pass around to the board members that shows that there's significant rock on the eastern part of the property, which significantly drives up their development costs. And so for that reason, they've shifted the development to the west and use this as their open space east. In addition to that, some of the other features of the property are a variety of buildings shown here in colors. The colors really just dictate the number of units per building, but we're at not more than 12 units per building as per the ordinance. We also have, in addition to this larger conservation piece, we also have a number of open space pieces that they're referring to as linear greens. And so we've got a linear green between these buildings, between these, and then here on either side of the clubhouse, which is the building shown here in brown. And the clubhouse is about 2,500 square feet. And one thing I didn't mention, but the Furman Road property will also have some shared community spaces that'll be interior to the building. Here, because of the nature of the housing types, it's exterior. So we've got our liner green, which will provide some open space and some parkland for the residents. In addition to the buildings, the open space, we also have stormwater management that's shown on the property. And because of the way the property is sloped, which is essentially it goes this direction and that direction, what the developer has done is created two stormwater facilities. The first one is here along Greenwich Street, and then the other one is here. This one is being contemplated for a wet pond. So it would basically look like a man-made pond of sorts, which would be really nice looking. That's currently being investigated as to whether or not that's feasible on the property.
They're hoping, they don't want to lock in, it could just be a regular detention basin, but because it's right in the front, they're hoping to make it an amenity. If it was a wet pond, now by state law, you'd have to have a 4-foot fence around it. So the ordinance that was introduced and you adopted tonight, they had originally wanted a higher fence. We told them, no, if you want a higher fence for safety, apply for a variance, and if the board wants to let you go, if you guys want to let them go higher for a C variance for a fence, but that's a detail that does not have to be nailed down now, but just to, so you guys know, that might be a wet pond. It will be the first wet pond in the township. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but that's just a fact.
Who has determined, I assume, Diane, their engineering consultant, has decided they think they need two bases?
Yes.
I don't know if I agree.
Listen, but we'll talk to you later about that.
I know.
But nonetheless, I mean, at the end of the day, whether there's a wet pond here or not, or a detention basin, we've got two pieces of the site, which is going to be conservation land and development. The other thing that's important that I want to make clear is we've maintained on this site the 125-foot setback of all development to the side and rear property lines. So you can see that here, here, and then all in this area. And then, of course, this is a much larger setback with no development. But in the development, the concept plan maintains that setback that's set forth in the ordinance, and they started to show some plantings, but like the Furman site, this is just a concept plan, so please don't take this plan as showing every tree or every planting that will be on the property. It's just to start to show folks how this site might be laid out.
And before now we go into the...
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, so this site also meets RSIS, also meets the parking requirements, and the parking is, it's a little hard to see because it's not a big lot, but basically, there's parking along all of these driveways. So there's perpendicular 90-degree pull-in parking here, 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 here.
And if you go up and take a look at it, they've counted every single space,
Yeah.
and there's lines for every single space. And by the way, tomorrow, right, on my ride out here, I got PDFs emailed to me of all these things. If I had them sooner, I would have sent everything. Tomorrow, I will send out PDFs of everything, and if you got, but there'll be PDFs, and there'll be public documents, so anyone will be able to have copies of them all.
So we've got our open space, our parking, our detention, and our building address on this site. Questions?
Well, before the question, you want to do the same thing we did? Show them out?
Wait,
Well, I
before
want
you
to
take the
make
site
sure
plan
I've got
down,
comments on the concept.
can you explain the 50-foot buffer for everybody and where the plantings are going and the 50-foot?
So
Because there's a
that's,
125
yeah,
within it of 50.
yeah, if you remember the Furman site we talked about, there's a 40-foot setback, and then within there, there's a 15-foot buffer. And because of the different land uses here, basically single-family homes being adjacent, we have a structure, a similar structure that's bigger. So we have a 125-foot setback, and then within the 125 feet, we have a 50-foot planted buffer. So within this 125 feet, there'll be a 50-foot planted buffer that provides screening, and that planted buffer...
His question is, he knows that there's a berm in the back, and he knows there's plantings on the berm.
The berm will be maintained. The berm will be supplemented to the extent that it does not meet the township's land use.
But the
landscape buffer.
berm is included in the
Yes.
50-foot buffer.
Yes, it is included within the 50 feet.
And on this one, the buffer is going to be at the perimeter with the berm, because the most effective way of cutting down the view is to have the berm as close to the property line as possible.
In fact, you can start to see that berm shown on the plan.
If we were to say they had to put in a new berm, dig this one up, it would take 20 years. Right, to get to where it is today.
Is there a height minimum for this buffer? The additional plantings or?
It's a
in the ordinance.
existing landscape ordinance requirements. I forget the caliper or the height, but it's usually around 8 or so feet for evergreen trees and 4-inch pallets, 3 or 4-inch pallets or more.
Just so you know, for an affordable housing project, you can't have a requirement that's more restrictive than a requirement that applies to other residential. You can have it less restrictive. So, Furman, the landscaping requirement is less restrictive, slightly smaller. This one follows the ordinance.
The minimum would have to be, the maximum would have to be.
Correct.
But we have site plan oversight on this, we don't have to get into the weeds.
Exactly.
Ask your questions, but.
Yep. Yeah, so the buffer requirements, because it's brought up, no less than 75% of the buffer length shall be evergreen trees installed at a minimum height of 6 feet. So that is pretty darn extensive.
Elevations.
You want to-
Now,
Elevations.
so let me say, now, so with England, with Petrucci, that hasn't done a whole bunch of these projects, they did elevations. What we have from Ingram are pictures of their projects. And their developments that are built. These are not plans, these are pictures of their developments, and they basically want input from the land use board on which ones of their existing developments you would prefer to have this look like. Yeah. I have two more. Why don't we have one for each row?
You got an extra one?
Not yet. Do the same one.
So folks, I'm gonna just, I
Hey
know.
guys,
like-
listen up. Listen to Beth. She's gonna walk you through, because Beth knows where each of these projects is. They're not labeled in the ones we have.
Yep.
We went through and labeled them.
So this first project with the brownish colored brick that extends for 3 pages. It's called the Willows at Flemington Junction. It's located in Raritan Township, just outside of Flemington Borough. Yep. So this is an example of I don't know the number of units per building, but this is an example of how they've done a handful of units in each building.
And just so you know, that first picture is a picture of a community building, because I don't know if Beth pointed out, you see that brown thing? That brown thing is a 2,500-foot community building.
So the next one is, it's also called the Willows, but this one is at Cedar Knolls, up in Cedar Knolls, New Jersey.
Show them a picture of it so they can go to the...
This one. So it's it looks a bit like the other one. It begins the first page with 2- and 3-story buildings with a playground in the foreground. This is Cedar Knolls. And Cedar Knolls extends only 2 pages. This is the second page of the Cedar Knolls Willow site.
Beth, everything we're looking at in this increment package are affordable units.
Yes.
They are all
Yes.
affordable.
These are not only, these are 100% affordable housing projects that Ingram has built in, around New Jersey, in Delaware, and in Maryland.
This second one that we're looking at, would this be a 2.5-story, or could it look more 2-story?
Well, I think it really depends on, it's 2 or 3 stories, because I can see on this page that this building is 3 stories, and then this building is 2.5 stories.
It's
One,
more,
2.5.
the other one is the one.
And then the next page begins the colored buildings with the siding blue, green, and tan. This is the Willows at Bailey Corner down south in Piles Grove, New Jersey. And these pictures extend for a total of 3 pages. And so the
So by the way, go slow on these, I'm hearing things from over here. People like these.
Piles Grove, that's in
Piles
Salem
Grove.
County.
Salem County. Now, just so you know, every one of Ingerman's projects is called Willows at, and then fill in the blank. So that's Willows at Piles Grove. I assume the project here will be Willows at Greenwich. And so anywhere Beth says these are located, if you wanted to go on the internet and try to find the project, it's Willows at, and then put it in the Willows.
We call it like Osage Orange?
I said if you ask them, maybe they'd even consider switching.
We actually have it as part of the agreement, right, that we need it.
Yeah, part of the...
They need somebody to market.
Yes, part of the affordable housing agreement, give the township the right to name.
How many pages is the Salem County?
The Salem County is, that's 2 pages.
Just 2 pages?
Yep.
3 pages of...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Joe, 3 pages. It's the first 3 of the colored buildings.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the next one is another building, actually sort of looks similar to the Piles Grove, but this one is the Willows at Northeast, and this one is in Maryland.
That starts with the last one.
Yes, yes. And this Maryland site rather, is for two pictures, with this being the second. Alright. And then next, I think this is the last one. The last 2 pages of the packet beginning with the playground is the Willows at Alder Creek. This is in Newark, Delaware.
Newark.
Newark, thank you, Delaware.
And by the way, those pictures are in there to show you the type of playground that they could do if you guys wanted a playground. What they described as these green areas on the conceptual site plan are not just going to be grass. They're going to have paths, and they might have amenities in there, but again, that's a detail that would come in with the site plan.
Yep. So, and then the last page is not just the play area, but you can start to see the buildings that were developed down in Newark, Delaware. So even though these are just pictures as opposed to proposed renderings, the developer is seeking the land use board input as to which development it likes the best so that it can start to model its architectural plans based on these. So maybe if we could at least start with, because you can see some of the primary differences are the building materials. We've got the rows at Huntington Junction, and I can see your knoll as well being this predominant brownish, yellowish brick color, and then maybe a mix of stucco and siding. And that contrasts with the willows at Bailey Corner, the first picture of the colored buildings, let's say. And so if maybe folks could give me a sense as to whether or not you like I'm just going to say the colored buildings versus the brown and written buildings. It's better. Do you have a sense as to what facade you like? Color? Okay.
Well,
Most people like, just kind of,
Please.
this project in general is what, I mean.
Yeah,
That's the Piles Grove? Beth, why don't you ask for people to raise hands?
Raise your hand if you like the Piles Grove site. It's this one. Or, I'm not raising my hand, but...
Right.
Yep, that's it.
Anyone like something better than Piles Grove?
Yes.
Yes?
Anyone? Yeah. So again, it's unanimous for the Piles Grove architecture.
I would say though, just that I do like the mixed cladding on some of the other projects where it's not all flat. It might be nice to have some, like at the bottom, some stone or some brick or something to break that up. I mean, we can get into the weeds on that one.
But I think that's an important comment to give them now.
No, that's it,
The
yeah.
cladding is preferred, but the land use
Right.
board, and I'm saying this as a question, the land use board would like some integration of masonry or stone.
Yeah, just so you realize,
to
Ray,
break that up.
something like that, I would want, if that's a recommendation to the township committee, and the township committee agrees with that, that is something I'd want to get onto the elevation
Yeah.
and into the amended developers agreement.
Yeah.
Because if they can meet the ordinance without it, and just do clapboard, if the township wants, you know, the first level, some sort of stone, that's one of the reasons I want this elevation incorporated into the agreement.
So if you look at, I think it's the third picture.
Yep.
Yeah, there's the title page, and there's the
Frank,
first
go
picture.
over there.
The second
This
picture,
picture?
if you look at the
see what
unit
he's saying.
on the right side of that picture, take away the porch with the weird columns and look at the way those buildings are with the case layer,
Yep.
like a brick or something.
Right.
I think that's more attractive than just...
Me personally, I don't like the brick, but I wouldn't mind doing stone.
Stone.
Yeah, stone.
I'm just saying to
Yeah.
have it broken up, so it's...
Like
not-
this has the stone on it.
Yeah.
That's stone, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
stone.
So John,
That's
this
what you're
picture.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something so it's
With
not...
stone as opposed to brick.
So it's Piles Grove,
Piles Grove with the...
with Flemington Junction stone.
Instead, but using brick instead of stone.
No. They want stone instead of brick.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Sorry. I'm done.
I think the recording picked it up, you're good.
So, questions, comments on the architecture, or anything else on this site, or comment while we're at it? Yeah, they are going to integrate play spaces into this, it's just not shown on the concept plan, but that's one of the reasons why they showed the play spaces in those pictures, to give you a sense of what they've done and what they'll consider here.
I got a question for the board. There's a picture of a playground, but it has AstroTurf. What's everybody's feeling on that?
It's not AstroTurf. What you're saying is, it's synthetic turf.
Synthetic turf. Did it
They
look
have
that
to-
great?
I think that's semantics, but at the end of the day, a little bit of experience with that stuff. I mean, it's not maintenance free, but it's probably, you know, depending on the level of maintenance, it's not going to be dirt in a year, and that's probably a plus. They use a newer material that's cushioned and safe. You try to have a playground, and you try to have, you know,
Just so you know, they also have new rubberized
I was gonna say,
playground
the
services.
rubber.
Right, and the playground's gonna have to meet certain, specs regardless for cushioning and all that, right?
but if you had a small area like that, and it's actually natural grass, it would probably be dirt. It's not be dirt, right?
Just don't play on the old parking lot like we did.
Or you could have the kind of like, safety mulch that we have in our park.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're going to have to meet safety requirements for any play space.
All right.
Now, do we get a consensus on whether we want playgrass or not? That is, Greg, can we ask them, why we vote on mulch, so why don't we just take a vote on whether...
Wasn't it something that we would sort out later?
You might as well tell them now, so they put it in the...
Worthwhile.
Crawling, what's that called in our current playground, current school park? That's playground mulch.
Playground mulch, right.
Yeah,
But what-
playground mulch.
but-
And it's 9 inches, right,
It's not-
certified playground mulch. Wood.
So you guys prefer wood
Yeah.
Do you want to get into
Playground
wood
mulch
versus rubber? as
over a
just
rubberized
not-
surface?
Not the, what's a PC, not AstroTurf, what is it?
Synthetic turf.
Synthetic
Synthetic
turf.
turf.
Do folks want to get into that level of detail, or do you just simply want to say not synthetic turf and leave that to the developers?
Or do you want to say, if you want to say,
Well, I would say,
Because it's,
there's some great new product out there, and if you're committed to the mulch, that's a replenishing situation
Right.
annually,
correct,
Okay?
you know.
We have-
But they would
Well,
have,
we do, but if they go in there, they've got some of this amazing new rubber playground
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah,
that
but
meets certain things that
you can't even
probably
tell
doesn't
the
have to be replaced
difference.
for 10 years.
solid
Yeah,
rubber,
listen.
it's not,
But this, I don't want to get into the...
No, you're right.
I don't
I
want to get
think,
into those-
yeah, I think we should have some
No, no,
discretion
wait,
to
wait.
let,
But I think if we could have some discretion, because some of the stuff, you want recycled rubber tires in there? I don't.
That's amazing product, Frank.
I think it's
Amazing
ugly
product.
looking. It's like urban looking. I don't know how everybody else...
I don't know,
feels. wouldn't want
I use it a bunch, it looks great.
I'm not saying it doesn't work great, but that's just my...
But I don't even think that they're talking that. They're talking about these new pads that interlock and stuff like that are literally like 3-inch, meet the state and federal codes.
well, there's the
But I
aesthetic,
think that's really, I don't know that we want that right now.
well, there's the aesthetic considerations that, you know, we want something that looks nice, but there's also going to be regulatory issues that they have to meet for
Right.
playground. So they're probably going to have, I mean, I think this might be a situation where we let the developer who does this stuff present what the options are, and then we slug it out when we know
you know, I
exactly
mean,
what
we're
the
gonna
options
have plenty of opportunity
I have an idea.
That's fine.
I have an idea, because the ordinance doesn't mention it, so maybe we just ask to get a note put on the plan that says, any playgrounds and playground equipment are subject to review and approval by the land use board.
Yeah, okay,
Very,
We
very
had a
much
note-
set up.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you can add it to the, well, yeah, put it on the plan.
We're gonna put it on the
in
plan.
In the agreement.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
a meeting in itself.
Yes.
Since we're getting into those schematics, I didn't think we were tonight, but in that side of it, on the Route 173 and Voorhees Road, even though there's that large setback off of 173, because they were talking about there being a play area there, I think there should be a requirement, because it's a 50-mile-an-hour road there to be a decorative fence as a protection.
It's gonna be, not a decorative fence, it's gonna be a safety fence. As Beth said, it's gonna be a safety fence with landscaping.
Exactly, but I
That's
didn't
in
want
the
it to
plan?
be like, you know, a regular
Yeah, but
aluminum
no, I'm gonna
fence.
have-
Or like
Whatever
post
note-
around with chicken wire.
Whatever
You want a
note,
real fence.
whatever note we put on the Ingerman plan is gonna go on the Furman plan.
Right. And, so, we're going to tell the Ingerman and
Yes.
Petrucci that, you know, we want their plans to be substantially consistent with what we see tonight, plus the input we're going to give them, but we're still going to have an entire site plan process.
Correct.
So, and that's not to say we can't kind of roll up some comments tonight, but we're going to have plenty of time to look at these things in detail when we do the site plan. What we're doing now is we're able to give them some feedback early on sort of the big picture items, so that they don't spin their wheels when they do the
Right, but
plan.
it's not just that. It's because I want to not lock them into every detail, but I do want to have this amended affordable housing agreement with both of them, saying that when they submit the plans to this board, it's going to be substantially similar to that. That's why we're going to add these playground notes, even though it might seem like a little detail. That's why we're going to add these playground notes to the two plans.
So I would say maybe the final choices of cladding, roofing, and color would be subject to approval by the land use
Yep.
board too.
Yeah, that's good.
Definitely.
I mean, we all know kind of what we like, but then we can get more detail when we do the site plan.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody have any other suggestions for feedback for either Ingerman or Petrucci?
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of people here from the public, so what I'd like to do is maybe open things up for some comments or questions related to these sites. I know you probably all would like to talk about Russian collusion and stuff, but if we could keep it to the topic that we're on tonight, that would be great. So I would ask if anybody from the public wants to make comments about anything that we saw here. If you do, please go up to the podium, state your name.
Yeah, and this one,
Where you live.
I'm not going to swear anyone in. This is the
This
equivalent
is
of a
comment.
concept review of a plan. This is not a hearing, so you just get up there and give the input, whatever you want the board to hear.
You took the long way around for impact. That was good. I like that.
Bill Gilliard, 13 Barn Swallow Court.
And can you spell your last name?
Gullion. Regarding that water, you don't want to invite these. They're
So you're saying you suggest no water feature because it would invite geese? You suggest that it just be a regular old detention basin?
correct.
And even if, you're saying that for you, driving by with the aesthetic look of a pond versus a regular detention basin is worth it because you won't get the geese?
Yes.
Not to put any
Not to
words
put
in your
words in your
mouth.
mouth.
But that's the impact.
But that's the impact. Those are the two ends of it.
Ways are ways of it.
Yeah.
So whether they've got geese or not doesn't affect me, but it really is an issue for people that are around there. This would be stepping.
Yeah, I would agree that this is definitely a concern with the pond.
Yeah.
Well, the playground's not, the playground might not be anywhere near that pond, but we get the point. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Sure.
Sure. Just
Kathy McDermott.
Is that a Kathy with a C or a K?
Okay. I have a question about the Dumont, the berm that's there right now.
Mhm.
So that's staying as is?
Yes.
What are they gonna do to improve that? Like, are they gonna,
It has to be, whatever the ordinance says, however many feet thick of landscaping has to be on top of it, will have to be additional plantings. If you look at the drawing, when you get to both ends, it kind of peters out, so just by looking at the plan itself, they're going to have to do something to the ends. Whatever the township's ordinance requires will have to be done. We can't require more than the existing ordinance.
I think I might understand where you're coming. When I drive by there, though, that berm looks like it's more or less a natural hedgerow, like a farm field hedgerow that's just been left, correct?
it's a mess because nobody's taking care of it
Right.
all these years.
So that berm will be part of this Dumont property,
Right,
correct?
just so you understand something, my understanding from talking with the township engineer, Mike Finelli, the berm was constructed by the people who constructed the shopping center across the street, because that was a requirement. The township owns the property. Right now, I don't want to put, the township's responsible right now for maintaining that. Once this developer takes ownership of the property, they're responsible for maintaining it. They will be responsible for maintaining the landscaping. If garbage blows around, they'll be responsible for picking it up. If landscaping dies, they'll be responsible for taking care of it. Right now, the reason that you have what you have is because one party built it, the township owns it, and the township's just left it alone.
Okay, so behind that berm, behind that berm, are they gonna clean up whatever's on their part? Because-
Whatever's on their property, they will be responsible for maintaining.
No, not maintaining, cleaning up before they start it.
Okay, there's a berm there.
Cleaning up,
There's all this crap there.
Like garbage?
Garbage?
Garbage, trees, everything.
Yeah, all that would have to be cleaned
Yeah.
up.
That
Yeah.
has to be cleaned up, she's
Yeah.
asking, and I'm assuming it is.
Yes, correct.
Before they start drilling all the rest of the trees there.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
this is like woodland debris, basically?
Yeah.
Well, trees that have fallen from
Yeah.
the berm.
Yeah, the answer is
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
If somebody walks back there, you'll see it's a mess.
Okay. Yeah, that'll have to be cleaned up by
Yep.
the developer. There's no proposal to maintain the natural state of that area. That's not the case. Instead, it's going to be a landscape, it's going to be a setback with a landscape buffer that meets the ordinance requirements. The ordinance requirements will set forth certain planting standards that they'll meet, and as part of this process in readying the site for development, they'll have to go through and address any problems with the site, and it sounds like that is one of them. They'll have to address that, so it's part of a maintained landscape area.
So who's going to enforce once they build this, that they're going to keep that?
Well, the
Who's
best,
in charge of keeping
right,
that?
right, it's very easy. If you guys live behind it and it's a problem, you call up the zoning officer, or you call up, if you saw that picture with that 2,500-foot building, there's going to be an on-site person there. So your first step is, you walk over there and you say something.
Oh, there's going to be someone on
Oh, yeah.
site all the time?
Oh, yeah, all the time. And then if you don't get satisfaction, then you call the zoning officer. Because now you have a private party that's responsible for it. I mean, the township's not going to issue itself a summons.
Yeah, the reality is this, it can only improve, Kathy. It's that, what you're concerned about in your comments should absolutely improve by them coming in there to develop this site and having a presence. They're not gonna want to have it look
First of all, their
like that anyway.
property's not going to be very marketable if there's a hot mess in the back of it,
Yeah.
so.
So it's really grown up like an old tree.
I'm not
growth,
advocating for this particular developer, but Ingerman, right now, they've built and they manage over 6,000 units in the tri-state, in the three-state area. So, I mean, these guys know what they're doing.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, winning lottery numbers, anything?
Please.
Okay, then we'll close the meeting to public comment and question. Does anybody from the board have any more comments on these or conceptual drawings that we saw tonight before we...
On the Furman building, how do you get into, you say the doors, key code, how do you get into the main doors, do you know?
No idea.
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll have to find that as per site plan.
If you're done with this, before someone makes a motion to adjourn, I just want to do a final update of where we are in the overall process. And what
Are you going to go through the schedule? Because we may have to move meetings, right?
Right, so remember, you guys set these an additional meeting for May and an additional meeting for June. Well, that's now been all but pushed back because the HMFA changed their application date for the tax credits. Instead of July, it's now September. So I have Ingerman's schedule, I don't have Petrucci's schedule yet. Once I have it, so tomorrow I'll send out all these, the concept plans and the elevations. Once I have Petrucci's schedule, I'll send out the schedules, but it looks like there's no way the board's gonna have to meet twice in May. It might not even be any in May, depending on if we have some other application. And it will be interesting to see if these things are ready to start in June or not.
Susanna, Mike, do we have, I think there was a zoning thing that was hanging around out there. Is that moving forward, or is it stalled?
There's two things that are hanging, out there,
Are they both incomplete still?
yes.
So, they're both incomplete right now, so,
All right, so just because the board's going to be expected to have an awful lot of meetings between now and September,
yeah.
so if these guys aren't complete by the deadline, push them. I mean, I don't want to,
Or you can tell them that if they don't do something, that they're going to end up hurting themselves, because they might not be able to get hurt
But-
for a while.
Right, the one I suspect may go away, the other one will definitely they will be here. So I will
the
relay
question is when, right?
Well, I would expect it to be potentially soon.
I know this isn't
No.
something you can answer off
No.
the top, but just your gut, would the one that's moving forward be a one-meeting
Yes,
Okay.
I believe it. It's just a lot line adjustment. It's a simple application.
Yeah, so I would let them know that if they want to get on the schedule, that May, this is going to sound... May be an opportunity.
We're both going, how about that?
Because once we get through that, we're going to be up to our, neck in
eyeballs in
these site
affordable.
plans, and then we won't be able to get them in.
John, what's
Does the
your
meter
right
start
now?
running when we deem them complete?
Yes.
Yeah.
You expect the submissions made by these guys when?
I figure by the end of May.
Full site plans.
No, preliminary site plan.
Yeah, that's right, you went through that, that's
Not-
right. Yes, I got
Preliminary approval, not
Okay.
final approval.
Yep,
Okay.
okay, that's doable.
So, yeah, if we have I won't say but if we have the applicant ready to go in May, that would be probably to their benefit if they want to get...
I have to contact them anyway, because I have to return a phone call, so we can kill two birds with one
Yeah,
stone.
enough said.
Perfect,
Just
perfect timing.
Might not be a bad to
Nope.
give them a heads up. So then, we don't need an extra meeting in May, but we may need an extra meeting in June. Is that what you're saying?
Right now, you have an extra meeting in June scheduled. I'm saying you may need an extra meeting in July.
Instead of May.
We'll definitely
That's a
have-
good month for extra meetings.
I know.
Yeah, with everyone on vacation.
I understand.
Perfect. So why don't we do this? Why don't we table that until the next meeting?
Oh, yeah, correct. I just wanted to give you a heads up about it.
Okay, that's fine. I don't want to
No.
try to schedule...
Right, correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Got it. Oh, so is that all?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
And everybody should have gotten, I'm sorry, from the clerk, a financial disclosure statement. Everybody should have gotten an email from Lisa, and you have to go online and fill out, this is the printout, because I rushed through it before I came to the meeting, but there's this financial disclosure statement that you have to do as a public servant, is that what we heard? And it's pretty simple to do, it's just source of income and stuff like that, so. If you have any issues, yeah, if you've done it before, you have an account, and you can just put in your email and your password. If you don't remember your password, you can get it, and then just fill it out. If you've never done it before, you have to sign up for an account.
Every year, right?
Yeah, you know about this, right?
Yeah, every
All
year.
right, so if you have any questions, email Susanna at Land Use Secretary, Greenwich Board, whatever
Yeah.
that is, and
I have an
she'll help
email.
walk you through it. Is there a deadline on this?
Yes.
So 30th of April. So, gotta get that done. And that's it.
Who's making a motion? Want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second? All in favor?
Aye. All right.
Opposed? Abstained? That was moot.